Attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello and good morning. I am happy to be here presenting for you today. My name is Karen Masullo, and this is the second in our series of Crisis Coach 2018 webinars. Today we're going to be talking about predictive insights, looking for clues in advance of a crisis. I want to thank you all on the phone today for taking time away from your busy schedules. If you're at your desk working, I hope you can hear us well. If you're sitting at a table with your coworkers, that's great because we're going to have a mini exercise today. We're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to test to see what your responses might be if a situation were to occur in your organization today. Now, while we're doing that, feel free, please, to connect with us on Twitter at Firestorm Sol, Firestorm Solutions on Facebook, Continuity Experts on YouTube, and Firestorm Solutions on LinkedIn. The hashtag for any social engagement on any social tool is Crisis Coach. If you use that in your message, I'll see you and respond to you, or one of our team will. And you can always contact us, of course, on our firestorm.com website. During the session today, if you have any questions or comments, we do encourage you to do that. You can use the chat window or toolbar should be on the right-hand side of your screen through GoToWebinar, and we welcome your insight. Additionally, today, I've attached 2 files to this session, and you can access those again via that dashboard. They are 2 PDF files. One of them talks a little bit about what predictive intelligence is, and the other one is an infographic that you can share with your coworkers. So here we go. Let's talk a little bit about what we can and can't do. This exercise is not complete without accompanying oral comments and discussion. Any work product provided by Firestorm should be read in conjunction with the guidance given by your national, regional, and local authorities, as well as your organization's personal counsel. Moreover, this information is not legal advice or legal opinion. Okay, that's out of the way. As you know, Firestorm transforms crisis into value, and we empower you to manage crisis and risk. We're going to talk a little bit about what that means. We are more than just crisis management, critical decision support, crisis communications, public relations, and consequence management. And we're going to talk a little bit about that just so that you can see how the breadth and scale of Firestorm has evolved into this year. Today's moderators, we're always happy to have the ever-pleasant Blair Neville out of New Jersey with us, and Joe Caratanudo from the New Jersey Manufacturing Exchange Program. Joe, would you like to say a couple of words before we get started today?
Sure, Karen. For those that aren't familiar with New Jersey MEP, we are a organization whose focus is really to assist manufacturers, small, large, medium-sized manufacturers in the state to become more efficient, more productive, more globally competitive in what they do. And we do that through services like assisting companies get R&D credits, or helping companies with process improvement like Lean and Six Sigma methodologies, in addition to certifications like ISO, AS, automotive certifications, obviously business continuity planning. And one of the things that we're doing that's new is the state of manufacturing, which last year's event resulted in a manufacturing caucus being established. It's actually a bipartisan caucus, and the meetings are occurring again in April, on April 4th in Trenton, and on April 6th at the County College of Morris. And we encourage all manufacturers to register. They can do it on our website, and there's no cost. And of course, the website is njmep.org. So please register if you're a manufacturer. Karen, back to you, or to Blair?
Let's go over to Blair. Say something, Blair.
Yeah, hey Karen, thank you very much. And I usually like to start these webinars with just thanking the MEP for their efforts and their support of us. We've been working with the MEP here at Firestorm for, gosh, Joe, maybe at least 3 years now, providing these webinars and continuing education. And I think it's been a big benefit for the MEP clients, as well as anyone else who jumps on these webinars, listens to the information, and we've gotten lots of feedback on it's great education, but we wouldn't be able to do them without the help of the MEP. So again, I thank them for their support and their commitment to continuity and the idea of helping their clients with preparedness. So again, Joe, thanks, and Karen, let's start.
Well, that sounds great. Thank you both so much. And as we move forward today, for you that are listening, again, thank you. And Joe and Blair will be contributing to the conversation. And if you have a question or would like to contribute, please, again, just use your GoToWebinar console and the chat feature. And our ever popular moderator, Mr. Bill Baker, who is also on the call, will let us know. I am Karen Masullo. I'm going to have a new picture taken. But what we're talking about today is the use of predictive analytics, or technically big data. And predictive analytics is the use of statistical algorithms and different types of machine learning techniques to identify or predict the likelihood of future outcomes based upon historical data. And in 2012, Jim Satterfield and I were discussing the tools that were created for marketing in order to feed predictive ads based upon past buying behaviors. And we said, why can't we apply that to behavioral risk? And that's when we created our Predictive Intelligence program. There are many other services now that provide that, but in their essence, all of the tools came up or bubbled up out of the marketing world, because everything seems to start with what can we sell you. So we use the same tools that marketers used, and then a group of tools evolved that were specifically created for chief security officers, risk officers, business continuity folks, that are designed more for safety, security, and business continuity. So we've seen all of those tools evolve. We leverage best-of-class tools, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the evolution of Firestorm, because Firestorm has an exciting addition to our Predictive Intelligence program, and that is that we now have within our group some very brilliant former Secret Service professionals who are able to take our Predictive Intelligence program for you to completely new heights. So we're able to not only analyze data in a way that we never could before, but much more robust reporting and next steps. So we're very excited about that, to see the evolution of our services for you. Now, we did ask you a couple of questions when you registered, and we said, first of all, whose responsibility is it to monitor? And because it always lived in marketing, about 20% of you say, well, it's marketing. And some of you say human resources, which is pretty common. We usually see that split between human resources and marketing. Only recently have we seen security start to be mentioned as well. Some of you just don't know, and some of you just aren't sure. It's some other group. And so if we look at that, we recognize that about 50% of participants that we ask this question to really aren't quite sure where it lives, or they feel there is a separate or special group that needs to own it. Technically, what we say is that everybody needs to own it. Education in this regard is really important. You know, in 2008, when Twitter first rolled out, everybody thought, oh, this is something new. This is something we need special training in, but it's going to fade away. It's not going to stay. And frankly, for me, it wasn't the emergence of Twitter that started us to become aware of, with odd grammar, to become aware of social media. Really, it was LinkedIn. LinkedIn is one of the first really robust social media sites. Monster and LinkedIn both came up at the same time. They developed communities. LinkedIn won. But LinkedIn is where all of social media, the social interaction started to bubble up. So for those of you who've been on LinkedIn since the Stone Age, I think we all know what it was like in the early days. So when Twitter came out, when Facebook evolved, and many of the other social tools, I think some of us were already pretty savvy about how to use them. So we just have to make sure that we've incorporated the education and professionalism of how we use these tools into the information that we supply to our employees. And then we have to have a formal way to listen to the conversations that are ongoing, specifically in regard to our brands and our people. So we asked you then, once we identified who owned it, we said, what do you use it for? Do you use it only for threat identification? Do you use it for both marketing and threat identification? Do you use it for neither, or you don't know? And I think it's interesting because it still shows us that we're still a little confused about how to use it, when to use it, and where to use it. And I would say if we incorporate it into all aspects of our organizations, it will make the management of it that much easier. As I've discussed, Firestorm has evolved in order to provide better services to you. We're excited about some of the additions to our teams, and we're going to look specifically at the Intelligence Solutions vertical sector we're talking about today, and that is where we identify risks, threats, vulnerabilities, behaviors of concern, and we have an exciting team of people headed by our Chief Security Officer, Jason Russell. Jason is located in our Michigan office. He has he himself is a former Secret Service professional, and he has two highly trained former Secret Service professionals on his team as vice presidents, one of which performed for the presidential protection level predictive analytics. So I want you to know that when you reach out to us through the program or any program that we offer to you, we have a pretty powerful group of people responding. For anyone who is on this call and who references the New Jersey MEP, please also understand that we want to give you our gift of 2018 every year. You have access to Crisis Stop. And Crisis Stop is simply, if you find yourself in a crisis, you have 1 hour of time. We have Blair Neville on the phone. You reach out to Blair or reach out to Joe in order to get in touch with Blair, and we will help you through that first hour so that we don't see the mistakes that so many people make. Blair, have you responded to any Crisis Stop situations in the last year? Do you want to mention that?
Yeah, Karen, thanks for asking. Because I did want to mention it is many people, a lot of companies, when they get into the idea of a crisis, you know, they sort of look at it as a big issue. And really, you know, what we've been trying to do with a lot of clients is help them understand a crisis can be something as simple as harassing phone calls. And we had one not too long ago with a client where they were just getting phone calls, and in a particular case there was 15 to you know, messages left. So the question was, is it a police issue? Is it something I should be worried about? Is it something that we need to, you know, hire security for? And being able to talk to someone like Jason, ourselves, and not to a team for an hour, and say, well, is this a crisis in our business? It could potentially be. We've had just harassing emails coming in to people, you know, in companies, those kinds of things. So that might not seem like a crisis to the business, but if you start to make the wrong decisions or get the wrong people involved, it could balloon and the consequences could be dire. So as I said, having a quick conversation with a professional who's seen these before, has done these analysis, who can talk you through the process and at least give you a couple of options to say, hey, if it happens again, here's what you do. Most likely, here's the situation. that's the part of Crisis Coach that we're offering to the MEP clients and saying we're willing to give that time, because if you start out on the right foot, it may not be a big issue, but start out on the right foot.
The other thing too, Blair, is that we bring an objective point of view to the table. So we're not influenced by past experiences with a person or someone. We're looking at it objectively. If you have some type of a reporting application, anonymous reporting built in, we can look at a history of something, but we're not coming at it with any specific bias. Additionally, anything else that we see in an intelligence gathering process, if it's not relevant to the situation, if it's a hiring situation, we're not going to be influenced by things that don't matter to the situation. So that's important too.
Great.
I wanted to give you just a little bit of a background on the scope. When I try to give a little bit of a scope of what we do in this area, I have more than 60 organizations monitored, and that doesn't seem like some huge number. But I wanted to give you an example of one of the organizations. One of the organizations monitored was a real estate investment trust in a very large state. And as a part of that real estate investment trust, they had a mall, a hospital, 7 parking garages, and a variety of office buildings. So it wasn't one business. There were about 45 businesses, and the hospital itself was extremely complex. It had a child care center in it, so there were some very special needs to it. So I want you to know that that number is inclusive of a really large group, and we have a couple of those different real estate investment trusts. We've also have monitoring set up for international organizations in specific languages and regions. We have more than 100 monitoring engagements, again, of various types for crisis stop, only just in the past couple of months, and that is instead of a long-term retained agreement, which we certainly have with many of our organizations, there are other organizations who may call us to enact our crisis stop program, and we will do sort of a spot monitoring just on that crisis or situation. Now, I will say that most organizations, once we have done that, and they see the value of that, and we can go ahead and put something in more permanently. But I want you to know that you have that available to you, where it may be we're only engaged for a 48-hour period to give you the idea and to support our crisis stop team, and then you can make decisions from there. We've delivered more than 3,800 hours of training, both face-to-face and via webinar, and all types of predictive intel, and much more than 100,000 employees, students, and others have been covered by our different social public media monitoring that we've done for different organizations. So I wanted to on a high level, talk to you a little bit about what it is, and then we're going to jump in to an actual exercise and ask you some questions and get a little interactive today. First of all, Intelligence Solutions support and combine the intelligence tools with, as we discussed, those seasoned practitioners, so those Secret Service people and others who understand current approaches to observing what is being said in a public way. We don't look at anything that is not already publicly posted. All we're doing is aggregating the information, putting it into context, identifying what is not relevant to the conversation, and drilling down to the most important data. We then utilize that threat assessment criteria to determine what the threat is to an individual, an organization, to your brand. We have elevated alerts that are integrated, and we support the internal development of your program. So we may start with one small engagement, and then we will work with you to educate and train and mature your team. We'll help you understand your own risk profile. We'll do a high-level threat assessment. If you're interested in that, contact Blair. We can do that for you at no fee. We'll do those threat assessments, and then once as a part of a program is established, we will establish escalation protocols. At some point in time in this exercise, I'm going to say to you, who do you call first? And as a part of your escalation protocol, it may be one thing for a natural disaster, it may be another person for a financial crisis, and it may be another person for something that surfaces up on social media. In order for our intelligence network program to be effective, we have to really understand your specific threats, your environment, your work environment, and then we document and we categorize what we perceive those to be. The challenge is you may have a couple of facilities around the country. The challenges your New Jersey facility has as opposed to your San Diego facility they're different. They're different regions, environments, different employees, different laws. So we want to take that into account. And they're common in some regard and then unique to each organization. And even if your organization, again, is one central organization with multiple locations, we have to take into consideration the uniqueness of that facility, the culture of the people and the management there. And then we identify the communication escalation points, intervention procedures, the escalation activities, and the workflows that need to be designed to support the program. Now, there's no guarantee that every threat's going to be surfaced. If someone makes a vague threat, they're not mentioning your name, your location, a person, and it's an anonymous account, it would be impossible for anyone to understand that. That's why we see so much armchair quarterbacking, don't we, after an event happens, because suddenly then messages make sense. But we're going to try to at least widen the net that we have and utilize the tools that we have to increase the probability that we can interact and diffuse a situation before it occurs. So we build a risk profile, we give it context, and we do the analysis of it to make sure we're understanding the challenges, the threats, and putting it into context. We create a threat alert workflow design that's comfortable for you and your organization and your team. And then we observe and report and observe and report. And we start developing a pattern of behavior that's unique to your organization. Once a situation does arise, we sit back, we look at our response to it, we do a hot wash, and we improve the program based upon those findings. We use a couple of different tools to make this happen. And I'm going to talk about each tool in a little bit more depth as we go through the exercise, how we might use the tools. What I can tell you is in a recent Forrester analysis, one of the tools we used was rated as their #1 choice over almost 25 other like tools. We use one tool that was created for marketing, so it does broad listening and then allows us to exclude certain terms, words, and items so that we can get down to the root conversation. And then we use a second tool that allows us to really zero in on individuals, their publicly posted information, and gives it to us in a visual format or in a geocentric format so that we can really see where conversations are bubbling up and occurring. In the case of that organization that we had monitored in the past that was a mall, that had a mall, we were able to see every store in the mall, people tweeting from the mall, and we were able to alert them at one point where someone was doing something nefarious around a child care area within the mall. So we really felt great about the ability to, we found out they had a fight club. I know I'm breaking the rule of Fight Club by mentioning Fight Club, but they had a fight club ongoing in their garage, in their parking garage. They had a variety of employees who were doing illegal types of things on the roof of their building. So not to mention the liability from the illegality of things that were occurring, but the insurance on injuries as well. So there are a lot of things that we can do and cast a sort of wide net to do that. So let's just jump in on this simple exercise. So if you're ready, be at the ready. I want you to look at your business. I picked a business with 300 employees at a single location, but look at your manufacturing facility today or whatever your environment is. Now, in the one that I pictured, I put the business offices and the manufacturing facilities in one common campus or physical area. That may or may not be true in your organization. So modify it based on your personal organization. And I want you to think whether you currently have any sort of regular monitoring set up to assist you in your marketing efforts. So do you know if there's somebody in your organization who has access to a Facebook page, a Twitter page, maybe Instagram, LinkedIn for the company? So if you don't know that, we sort of need to move you into one area of escalation because we don't even have a way to message out if we need to, right? Other than standard email, etc. Also base your response on whether you have regular monitoring set up to assist you in identifying behaviors of concern. So are you looking both for marketing and messaging out and engaging, but are you also listening for threats and risks? And let's go ahead and make it 2 o'clock in the afternoon. You're looking forward to the end of the day. It's Valentine's Day. And you're going to go home. You're going to have a nice dinner and enjoy your life. And suddenly you're alerted that a Twitter post has surfaced with the hashtag #MeToo plus your company's name. Clicking into the original post, you see that the account is anonymous. We have random girl, and it reads, "Me too. My manager at Widgets Manufacturing. No one will help me." If we look at the post, and if you don't know anything about Twitter, it really helps to have a team. And if you look at the post, we can see that there are already 250 comments on this specific conversation. There are 146 reshares or retweets, and 112 people have favorited it. That's a lot of activity on something you just saw. What's the first thing you do now? So everyone on the phone right now, what's the first thing you do? Do you go look at the Twitter post some more, try to figure out who it is? Do you call someone in your organization? Who do you inform? How high up do you escalate it? Do you ignore it completely? What next steps might you take in monitoring this? Do you have any way of knowing how many people have seen this and are discussing it? Do you know if people on your own manufacturing floor have seen this and are discussing it? Do you have any way of knowing who owns that account? Blair, what would you do at this point? Hello? Blair, are you there?
I'm sorry, I had you on mute there, Karen. Mute challenge. I want to just before I make a quick comment, I want to just sort of continue on your thought there. You're in a business. You're the general manager, owner of the business, which are typically, a lot of people we deal with in this world. As you said, who you're calling, what's your next move. Also, more importantly, what customers are seeing this, what clients are seeing this as well. So you start down that road. Who do you have to get involved with this? Is this an all hands on deck? And one thing I might say is that the first call you might want to make is to Firestorm.
Well, I think that's a great idea.
So,
all right, so let's talk about this. Let's talk about this a little bit. So how do we know? We don't know the scope of the situation yet. You're sitting at your desk, and by the way, if you're like every other person in the work world, you have a deadline today. There's something that's due today, right? You have a meeting, you have a deadline, you have a conference call. You don't have time for this, but here it is. And so there's a fire that you need to put out, but you don't know what that fire is made up of. So you may possibly try to put the fire out with something that will only inflame it more. So when we look at the tools, we would first use our key tool, which is our broad listening tool. And it's called Insights. And this is where we do keyword phrase analysis, and we look to see how many times that exact phrase is being used. Now, we need to be careful because there's no reason to add the Me Too hashtag because we know it's going to return us about 22 million results. So we have to take the phrase and use it in the context without that Me Too to see if we can figure out where that activity is coming from and how active it is. Have 12 people seen it or have 1,200 people seen it? Our tool gives us the ability to analyze what types of eyes may be on that post. It allows us to know the potential audience. We can't see the exact audience, but we know the potential audience. We had a situation last year, or it could have been the year before, forgive me if I can't recall, but we had a situation where we had a group that was traveling by bus. The bus broke down. They had to stay at a couple of hotels. And one of the franchise hotel chains didn't respond well to this group. They were rambunctious and partying, and racial slurs were made against them. There was reported video. The governors of both different states got involved, and we were able to use this type of a tool to tell us that for a while it was starting to die down. And then suddenly we received an alert that there were 2,600% more messages than in the previous time period. And the reason was because D.L. Hughley, the actor and comedian, had gotten a hold of the story and reshared it with his millions of followers and a couple of major print magazines. And it resurfaced the entire situation and really blew it up. So at least we had a heads up. We had a heads up what was going on before it became something that was just completely out of control. We also have the ability through this tool not only to know the potential eyes that may be on it and to receive alerts, but we're able to bring you into your own view of this so that you can be watching in real time with us. We're able to create a simplified dashboard for you so that given that you're busy and you have a conference call and a deadline today, you're going to be able to see at a glance what you need to. We're also able to source through extensive public social media and traditional media and new media posts. So if it's some obscure discussion board on the other side of the web in the darker confines of the internet, we'll probably be able to surface that up as well, either through direct listening or through the crafting of RSS feeds, which our analysts are trained to do. So we have that in place now. So we're looking and we're listening, and the next escalation occurs. A former employee of your facility shares the post from Twitter on her Facebook account and rails against the company that she too had this situation. Not only that, but they post on Glassdoor.com. They post on employee review sites. And you hear from someone in your office that there's a LinkedIn conversation going on about it as well. This person then posts some of her own complaints on your Facebook page. You have a part-time person who's managing your Facebook page for you. And that person who's trained to engage, because they're in marketing, marketers are trained to engage, does what she's trained to do. And she engages with the Facebook community that's discussing the issue. It turns ugly. People start accusing her and your company of hiding something. She's not trained to deal with this situation, panics, tries to lock down your Facebook page, and incites the community even more, because getting locked out was even worse than being allowed in. And suddenly you receive simultaneous panic phone calls from that employee, your human resource director, and 2 of your key customers who say, what in the world is going on over at your place? Blair, observations at this point?
Yeah, Karen, I can just, and you know, for those of you on the phone, you put yourself in that position. One of the things we always say in our presentations, you'll hear us commonly say, is that managers and directors and people who run businesses are trained to make decisions, but they're trained to make decisions with information. And that's what you do in your business day to day. In this particular case, people are coming to you now, your stakeholders, employees, family members, and asking you to start to make decisions, and you don't have any information. You don't have the details. You don't know what's going on, but yet this kind of an issue starts to escalate quickly. So again, you have to sit back and say, okay, what's my plan? Who am I talking to? What are my next steps? How do I just process all this information efficiently? It may not be effectively, because again, you have to start making decisions, but at least efficiently, so that I don't get myself into a deeper, darker position than I am today. Because I need to respond and I need to start moving things forward, but it's not something I've ever dealt with before. So again, who are you dealing with? Is this now in your HR department? And again, have they ever dealt with something like this? Or are you talking to your legal staff? And again, we get a lot of referrals from legal staff because they come back and say, hey, we understand the law, but we don't understand the crisis. So Karen, you know, you've talked to lots of law firms who've come to us and said we can speak to the legal side of this question, but the crisis side we can't. So again, you're coming back to who are you getting involved with?
It's interesting, Blair. I did I'm sorry, was that Joe?
Yeah, I wanted to comment as well. I think in the last phase, it's very anxiety provoking to decide whether or not you're overreacting to the situation in the early stages or you're underreacting to it. And now as you move into the second phase, where obviously it's escalated, then the anxiety is, well, how to react? And if at this point you don't have a mechanism in place to respond, time is not on your side. It's moving at a pace that's so quick that coming up with a response, as Blair said, that's going to be viable from a legal perspective and is not going to further escalate the situation, this is not a good time to start figuring out what you need to do. It seems like you need to have that already pre-planned in how you're going to respond in a situation like this, not have to deal with it at the time of, the situation is still active.
Doesn't it make you nervous just thinking about having to do all of that within a period of about 10 minutes? I mean, we need to have some, and the point of this is, folks, is that you may not have this exact situation pre-planned in communication or in your response, but it's just the exercise of getting close to it that will be helpful. And I think those are great points, Blair and Joe, and you're going to have another chance to comment because things are going to escalate just a little bit more here in a minute. Well, what we would do at this next step is use that Geofence tool, we'd put a geofence right around your manufacturing facility so that at least we can see is anything bubbling up out from inside your doors on your property. And again, that's only publicly posted information. If it's private, if it's Snapchat or something that's, you know, dedicated to a device, we're not going to be able to see that, and we shouldn't. But if it's publicly posted information, we can at least see that. We can look at the social graph of who's connected to who's resharing this information, who was the first person to reshare it publicly. And that's going to help give us a little bit of a clue as to what's going on. Because remember, we may have a victim here. We may have more than one victim here. And while we need to protect your brand and your reputation, we also need to protect someone who may be being victimized in your facility. And that opens up some other questions that we need to look at as well. And we can do a deep people search, a deep person search if we need to. If we have an email or a phone number on something that's somewhat anonymous, we can look at publicly sourced information and find out if there are clues to a person's identity, so we can help them if we need to. Next, we see another level of escalation. Now it's 225. We started at 210, it's 225. Your human resource person is still very nervous and concerned. You have asked a couple of other key management folks into your office and are asking them if they've heard anything on the manufacturing floor or in other divisions that anything is going on. And suddenly a specific manager is named in a social media post. Now, it's not by the person who originally alleged it. It's someone else who's got a beef about something and brings this person's name into the conversation in an unrelated way. However, as is the way of the crowd, often on social media, that person's name suddenly becomes intertwined with this original Me Too harassment claim, even though it's a completely separate issue. So that person is suddenly freaked out, they're concerned, they're afraid. There are alleged images floating around on private apps like Snapchat that say they have proof. A department manager in another area sends out an unapproved memo that has not been run by you, by human resources, by anyone. He sends out a memo cautioning employees that they are not to discuss any like event or complaint. A copy of that memo is immediately shared, as it will be, I promise you, with not only the National Labor Relations Review Board, but also a variety of news outlets. And you receive a call from a local news station requesting comment because they're going to air your story at 6 o'clock. How are you doing now? What's your next step?
Karen, Blair, a couple of points. I want to stress that in this exercise, which we've done, I don't know, thousands of these kinds of things for companies all over the country. Some can take as long as 2 days to do. But the reality is this exercise, there's no times on it. But if you think this could be within the same day, so this is all happening in the same, so it's not like a week or two where you have time to think and talk about it. You're talking about probably this escalating in less than
45 minutes.
A day. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it could, but so you really look at it and realize you're starting to move quick. One thing I do want to mention on the previous slide, the departmental memo, that's where the idea of the consequence management comes in, is that manager who sends out the unapproved memo isn't being malicious. They're trying to get ahead of it. That's what we hear a lot. We got to get ahead of this. We got to get in front of it. And their effort, although a valid and good-hearted and, you know, done in the best of intentions, could cause so much more, because now you have to start defending the memo. If you're telling people not to do and not to talk about things, you obviously are hiding something.
Blair, why don't you speak to this? Why don't you speak to this slide since you're moving in that direction. So go ahead and talk to this slide just a little bit. And we may run over just a couple of minutes. I apologize.
Yeah, just very quickly. Yeah, I mentioned this earlier. Is like, you know, we're in a situation when we talk to deal with clients is that professionals, we see the professionals, you guys are trained to make decisions, but you're trained to make decisions around a particular area or with information. And these are the facts. In a crisis situation, as it starts to escalate, these bullet points are what's going on. We always tell people make a decision and assume that anything you hear in the first 24 hours is probably wrong. And it probably is. You just don't have the data to support it. So you're working from maybe not erroneous information, but at least you don't have the facts to back it up. You don't have all the data. And when you get back to something Joe mentioned, is being prepared in the front end, there's typically not a lot of policies and procedures and plans for you to follow. I mentioned earlier in the conversation, who are you calling, who's getting in touch with whom, if clients are involved, who's responsible for that, other stakeholders, your banks, those types of things, who's dealing with those questions. It'd be nice to have all that written down beforehand so that you can get off and start to have those conversations with the right people as opposed to trying to delegate that. So again, that previous slide really comes down to the fact that if you're not prepared, it's very difficult to move forward.
And we want to understand what phase we're in. You know, are we in the guarded, elevated, imminent, or severe phase? Because each phase requires a different activity, a different next step to take. You know, all of these tools are effective and integral to your strategy, but in the end, their effectiveness is only going to be as good as the human beings who are charged with the use of either the tools or the process. So you don't want this crisis to be your crisis manager or your general manager's first crisis. And that's what we're here for. We've done it. We've been experienced with it. Frankly, I mean, we've seen just about everything. So why not just let us know so that we can help you identify what the next best step is forward. You know, many years ago I asked Jim Satterfield, our CEO, who our number one competitor was, and he said denial. And that is all of you sitting there today. I know you're not saying this, but just in case someone in your organization is saying, it's okay, but it's never going to happen to us. I mean, the famous last words. So why not prepare? Why not just be ready and designate a team for response, document your people, train on action steps, and be able to implement if something should be happen so you can be more nimble so that you can pivot as needed to the core messages that are important to the survival of your organization. Because without plans and procedures in place, you've just got stuff that's gathering dust. And so, again, let us help you. Now, what do you do next? As always, we're going to have a brief, and it's going to be a little bit of a different brief, but we'll have it on the website for you next week. You can contact Blair at Firestorm. Go to webinars at firestorm.com, and we'll make sure Blair knows that you're looking for him. And he'll also explain the Crisis Stop program. You can reach me directly also through that email or through Masullo at firestorm.com. Remember to register for next month's session. I'm going to do a follow-up to this session in a little bit of a different scenario. So if you want to gather teams around in your New Jersey facilities, we're going to do something a little bit similar. And don't forget to sign up for our newsletter. Also, in the GoToWebinar toolbar, you've got a couple of documents there. This is one of those documents that gives you a little bit of information about what a program might look like. And we can answer any questions that you may have on that. Blair, would you like to close up? And Joe, with a thank you to our folks today?
Yeah, Karen, one last comment. When we do risk assessments for clients and we help them understand what their vulnerabilities are in all parts of their business, one of the things that I very rarely ever see, probably never, but we always suggest is a risk is managing a crisis and being able to deal with that. And it's usually not something somebody really thinks about. Is that a risk in my business? Is the fact that I don't have the tools or the people or the background.
That's a great point.
And that's just what we were talking about today. Whether it's a very small or minor issue, or it could be something that's very big, the consequences can become dramatic with it. And I think I want to thank the MEP for driving this message. And as Karen said before, that initial phone call to myself or to Joe will get to the right people to have a conversation for 30 or 40 minutes and say, okay, let's just make sure you're on the right track. And then if you need our help, great, we can help you. If not, then at least you know you're heading in the right direction.
Thanks,
Thank
Karen.
you so
That was
much,
a great
Cliff.
exercise.
Yeah.
Thank you, Joe, for 45 minutes. It was a lot of fun. I hope you got something out of it. I hope everyone got something out of this today, and I'm glad it's just practice. So if you ever do need us in the real environment, we're here. Thanks so much, everyone.
Great. Thanks, Karen. Joe, thank you.
All right, take care.
Have a great day, everyone.
Take care. Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Bye.